Well, good evening, listeners. This is another installment of the Little Timmy diary stories. Timmy enjoys flying, but always books a window seat so he can see all the cool stuff one can see from an airplane window. On this trip, however, the window seat he booked was right over the wing, and being that this plane was a massive 777, the wing was huge, and it totally obscured his view. Right after takeoff, Timmy got up and asked the flight attendant if he could switch seats to get a better view. The flight attendant told him sorry, but no, he had to stay in his assigned seat. Upon returning to his assigned seat, Timmy removed a small toolkit from his carry-on bag and began unbolting his seat so he could switch it for an area with a better view. Now, upon landing in Dulles International Airport in Washington, D.C., Timmy was met with a personal escort, and it wasn't until months later he was discovered in a Turkish prison with nothing but the clothes he was wearing the day he disappeared and a worn-out copy of the book Midnight Express. Well, as we know from previous stories, Timmy loved to explore in the mountains, and often his search was to find a cave and make his way through the tunnels and labyrinths underground and uncover whatever mysteries might be hidden there. One particular day is etched in Timmy's mind forever, as he writes in his diary, and it gives him chills every time he thinks about it. It was a warm summer afternoon, and Timmy gathered up his hiking gear and headed off into the foothills behind his house. This day felt different somehow, and Timmy knew this could very well be a day of adventure like never before. About some 3 hours into the hike, Timmy stopped by a clump of shrub oak and noticed a darker shadow against the hillside. So he pushed through the underbrush, and to his amazement, there it was, the entrance to a massive cave. As Timmy cautiously entered the cave, turned on his flashlight, and made his way deeper and deeper into the caverns, he suddenly stumbled upon something that he knew with every ounce of his being just wasn't supposed to be there. In the weak glare of his flashlight, standing right in front of him, was a 9-foot-tall circus clown, wearing a skirt tied in an apron, and he had marshmallows glued to his forehead. His left arm was actually tied to a stake. Well, his fear of clowns aside, Timmy ran out of the cave screaming like a little girl, and quite understandably never mentioned this terrible experience to anyone, ever. An act of war was something Timmy understood. He studied all the great books on warfare and the history of war and pretty much everything you could want to know about the ins and outs of war. But yesterday's family picnic and his team losing to the tug-of-war challenge, well, he stormed away in anger and went into his room and burned all his war books, and then got dressed up in a Darth Vader costume he had from a few Halloweens back. He then grabbed his Boy Scout knife and a potato gun and mumbled under his breath, "If they want war, I'll give them war, by golly. Then we'll see who's left standing." Timmy accidentally left the hyperdrive unit switch active on his anti-gravity pod overnight, and in the morning found that most of the entire neighborhood was completely laid waste. Well, he had gotten up early to watch the sunrise the next day, and as he was gazing at the horizon, and staring at that beautiful yellow-orange orb rising ever so slowly in the distance, he began to realize that the entire landscape was a burned-out wasteland, and it turns out the orb wasn't really the sun at all, but rather some hideous weapon of utter destruction conceived by some yet unknown alien enemy.
This concludes another haunting episode of One Step Beyond Reality.